Hi and welcome back to my video diary of self-publishing. If you haven't been here before, my name's Wayne, self-published author of Broken Ceasefire and Xander's Salvation, under my author name of W.A. Blinko. So if you haven't checked them out, they're available on the Amazon bookstore. Broken Ceasefire is available on the Google bookstore as well. So I really appreciate if you do check out those two books and come back here and tell me what you think. Something that I've enjoyed about self-publishing and the journey is talking to other authors. One of which, Asa Rodriguez, I have talked to a couple of times about his stories because they're in the same genre as myself, which is science fiction. But I haven't just stopped there. I've got a quite good connection with other authors, and we have a monthly meeting and discuss trials and tribulations amongst our little group with regards to self-publishing, promotion, writer's block, and all sorts. One of which is Celinda Labrousse, and she happens to be a science fiction author like myself. So I opened up the floor to her and asked if she'd like to come onto my podcast, The Sci-Fi Fans. I was very pleased and grateful that she agreed to come onto the podcast, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about her books and what it is that she writes. I'm going to leave that up to her, and you can listen to the interview coming up. Thank you for watching. That's good. Okay, so Celinda, how do you want me to refer to you throughout the interview? As Celinda, if you... I can't hear you.
Oh, I hit something. Okay, I'm sorry. I hit my mute button by accident. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, my apologies. So Celinda is great.
Okay then. So your author name is Celinda
Labrousse.
Labrousse. Okay then. All right. So without further ado, then we'll get going. So thank you very much, Celinda Labrousse, for coming on to Sci-Fi Fans to talk to me about your book. I'm looking forward to finding out more about the story and what gives you your inspiration as a writer. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you for you to tell us all about your book. What is it about? Where can we find it? And that kind of stuff. So over to you.
Okay. Well, my book is a military science fiction. My main character is female, but she is stuck in the middle of an all-male team. In fact, it actually starts out, she is an underage teenager that gets kind of drafted by her circumstances.
Right.
And then the story develops out from there. I'm currently in a complete rewrite of the second book, which takes place 5 years after that. And then I have the third book ready for publication when the second book edits are complete, which takes place 10 years after the main event, 5 years after the second book. And so my series really grows with her as a character, going from her teenage years into her early 20s, into her mid 20s, into her 30s. And then, develops her life out from there. And funny enough, I like to think that classic movies are my inspiration for my characters and the stories they end up with. I don't believe that anything is new under the sun.
Yeah.
Everything is kind of like how these classic tropes play out in our heads and minds and what that means for our lives and how that develops. And for me, that means that my first book is this idea that came to me was, what would Star Wars be like if the rebels were the bad guys?
Right, because I have heard kind of like the fandom suggest that is the case. Now they've kind of put it on its head. So now I'd be intrigued to read more about your story and the characters. So where's the setting? Obviously, I'm presuming in space, but are we talking Earth, colonies, planets?
So they're colonies. I have a specific type of world built. In my world, there was a catastrophic anomaly event like the one described in the Bible in Noah.
Right.
But instead of there just being the water ship built by Noah with all of the animals and stuff and ark in it, God saw fit to that there was this one family group of people that were valid and serving him, and so they were gifted with a plans for a spaceship that then, from the heavens and from God, and so they blasted off the earth because the earth was going to be destroyed and all the people on it were going to be destroyed, and blasted off into space, and then had this long journey through space until they got to a colonizable planet significantly farther out in the universe, after hundreds of years. And then they developed their own civilization, and that civilization got destroyed, and then another civilization, and kind of like think in its most basic sense, all of the city building would be world building in my universe that was done in like the Middle East and those territories, and then outwards from that. And then how we look at the world today as all of these different countries and setups and stuff is under a Roman kind of like empire, just in multiple galaxies, because after all of this time and all of these things, and because their language wasn't separated, they only have one language throughout all of this, with, of course, development of how language develops, but still speakable across galaxies.
Yeah.
I know, I'm talking gibberish. Anyways, so the root of it is that there's one empire that rules all of these galaxies, and then the factions, and they have like a Senate planet where all of the they have a ruling class that owns certain galaxies, and then they have a colonial class that is still going out and terraforming and developing the known galaxies, and building farther and farther out. So there's outer territories. There's this whole. I like to think of like the Earth as a microcosm of possibility for an outbuilding if like this was happening on a global scale with engines that can travel at the speed of light or faster.
Right. So I've got a couple of questions there. So on a technology level, I'm presuming then everything's pretty much advanced. So you've got hyperdrives, light speed. So you've got a real tech kind of built into the worlds as well.
Yes, they have hyperspeed, they have high tech, but my tech and okay, so this is where my British influence really comes into play. I love Red Dwarf, and I love the idea of hard light hollows. So how do you have a hologram that interacts with the real world, or how do you interact with a hologram? And I've been told that this would take a lot of power. So I have a whole mining industry that is specifically for developing the crystals for this power source. But the world runs on hard light hollows.
Right.
Whether it's the guns, whether it's the furniture, whether it's like some of the walls, it's like hugely hollow based, and very manipulated. So let's say that the core of what a gun is, which is basically a power source in a container, can be upgraded with software instead of having to be like hardware updated.
Right. All right.
Across the military. So like, oh, we have new guns, so they like blink upload the new software, and then suddenly their gun looks totally different.
Right. That sounds an interesting concept on that one. So have we come across any alien races yet?
No.
Right.
All of my races are a level of humanoid. The only thing alien about them is how the first types of terraformed planetoids
Right.
um, messed with the growth cycles and human evolution. So there are some humanoid based, meaning like this area was colonized and then the planet turned their skin blue because they're the type of sun in that area and the type of environment means that people have a like almost clear skin,
Yeah.
lacking pigment, and so the blue purplish of our blood shows through and
Yeah.
turns them like a light blue purple.
Yeah. It seems like you've put an incredible amount of thought into all of this world building, and I think you've it's definitely come across that you've thought of literally everything. So where the humans have evolved, what the effect that has. Also surmising then you've also included how weightlessness affects the human body, and so you've probably got people that are of a taller skeleton and taking gravitational pull into consideration. And yeah, okay, so how how have you come up with all of these ideas and literally thought about creation from the very beginning and expanding it into evolution? I mean, that sounds like what you've done.
I stole a lot. So again, I don't think there's anything new under the sun. And science fiction and science fiction fantasy is like my favorite genre. Television. I don't read as much science fiction as I read fantasy, but I just absolutely love it. I'm not a horror person, so I have to be really careful with what I read in science fiction because as much as I love you, I do not like Alien. It is way too horror for me. I couldn't. No. I wrote a zombie book. Like the first series I ever completed was a teenage zombie book, and I've never made it 10 minutes into Shaun of the Dead. I just can't do it. Like, I'm not a zombie person.
What about, have you seen Paul?
Huh?
Have you seen Paul?
No, that doesn't sound familiar.
It's got Simon Pegg and the other guy in it. I forget his name. They go on a road trip and they come across an alien called Paul.
No, I haven't.
I need
to see this.
You definitely need to see it.
Okay, I will put that on my list because I've seen At World's End.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love Hot Fuzz. That is just like my jam is Hot Fuzz. But yeah, no, I still can't watch past the first 10 minutes of Shaun of the Dead. I love the humor, but I can't get past it. Oh, no, zombies.
If we could all tolerate the same thing, wouldn't it? You know?
Yeah.
People like different things, and that's what life's all about. So, okay, my mind is kind of blown by the amount of detail you've come up and created and put in. Where does the story pick up? You say we've got this effectively underage girl in a man's world that shouldn't be there. So
that's pretty much when we pick up the story. I mean, I don't necessarily want to give away the beginning, but I start out with a save the cat moment. If you understand as a writer, like to endear your audience to your book, you're supposed to have a cat in a tree or someplace, and then your main character cradles them to safety from the tree. And in my case, it's a droid, because so even though I have only humanoid builds, for the most part, I do have a completely separate race in sentient droids.
Right.
And I even have vampires in my novel, but my vampires are humanoid built droids that turned on their human masters. Right. And gain freedom for a percentage of droid kind by sacrificing the blood of the human masters that they massacred, and so they like drink the blood of humans for their freedom. It's a really cool mythos.
Yeah.
But anyways, I have this little droid, not not a vampire, who just is absolutely adventure loving.
Right.
And it is like a mix between R2D2 and K9,
Right.
and like his abilities and interests and direction of build. And he sneaks away from the farmhouse and goes out on an adventure, and my main character is stuck trying to track him down.
Okay.
And in the process of trying to track this droid down, her entire world just blows up. So what she thought about her life, what she thought about what she was going to do with her life, what she was developing to think about as a teenage girl in a colonial family, in a colonial world, everything that her family had put into their lives just completely implodes. And from that, she just kind of goes along with what's happening to her.
Yeah.
And just kind of is like non-responsive in this bubble of, I can't process this. I can't process what happened to me. And she gets to a point where she decides to take control
Right.
after she mourns what has happened to her.
Right.
And that's where the story really gets its legs, is that she starts becoming her own person, and she grows into the fact that, yes, this is my life, yes, this happened, but I am still going to live. I am still going to figure out what my needs are, what my wants are, and how that fits into the greater universe of the world I live in.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you mentioned Red Dwarf there. And Star Wars, what other influences you with your writing?
So my second book, it has a very the Mummy-like base thing,
Right.
the Brendan Fraser one.
Yeah.
Because I have a freed, resurrected creature that's going around terrorizing people. And my third book got its legs really from Indiana Jones, because it's very have to stop the big bad, larger than you think. It's still the rebels, but larger than you think organization that's terrorizing the world, trying to track down this ancient artifact through, these cavernous ruins, because it belongs in a museum. So, and then my fourth book that is still in edits. It's written, but it needs a rewrite so bad. Really is kind of more like a Alex Craft kind of, more like, so the series is really action adventurous, like through classic, but of all of the action adventure themes and stuff, that one's more like political intrigue, and it focuses a lot on Senate, which is my political planet. And I love this planet because basically they figured out that nobody likes to walk in the rain when they're in a business suit. And so besides the people that are like flying around, they centralized all of the water functions for the entire planet underground,
Right.
so that it never rains. And there's barely a cloud ever in the sky because they like have harvesters
Yeah.
specifically that reroute all of the water through an aquifer, underground aquifer system.
Right.
So it's like that perfect temperature, perfect weather, but all skyscrapers, all large buildings across an entire planet. And it never rains.
It sounds like you've got so much attention to detail that you could probably write a single book on each planet and its biosphere and political makeup and everything. Um, so, and you say you borrowed a lot from everybody else, which is fair enough. I mean, I do agree with you. I think the saying is that there are only actually 7 stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Redemption, revenge, love, and that's kind of where I get stuck. But then you've got various offshoots from those as well. Yeah, and it's about how you create the story and put that forward. So it sounds like you have definitely got your own style, and the world building is. I'm surprised, to be honest, because from my own perspective, I thought I've done quite well with what I've done world building, and it sounds like you've taken that 2 or 3 steps forward.
Well, I have less of a world build and more of a universe build.
Yeah.
Because I have more than one series based in this. Like I have 3 series that one that's currently the one I'm currently writing, one that I'm releasing on Kindle Kindle Vella. I keep always saying that name wrong. I apologize. One that I'm releasing on Kindle Vella when that goes live. And it's more of a Doctor Who like show.
Right.
And I have like elements of time travel and history building and future civilizations and universe traveling in that series.
Right.
And then that like I'm still writing on that one. And then there's one I haven't even written that is a kind of steampunk, kind of gaslight series that is also based in this world build. So I've had years to like develop out my greater universe, and how all of these characters and things come into play, and like how do vampires exist in my universe, and how do werewolves exist in my universe.
Have you got a werebear shapeshifter though?
Yes, I have werebear shapeshifters, and they're all German ancestry. Because so spoiler alert, this is absolutely spoiler. I haven't written this anywhere, and if someone steals it, well, okay, it's not new information, so people can do with things that they like. My book will, of course, be me, so that's what's important. But in my world builds, the Roman Empire, when it was starting to fail, decided to start gene splicing.
Right.
And they created werewolf shapeshifters.
Right.
And to combat that, utilizing ancient mystic techniques, in my world, magic and future tech that gets into the wrong hands are kind of one and the same. It's like it's not really magic, it's science, but it's science people don't understand. Like if you got a microwave and had it hooked up to a forever battery, but it dropped into the 12th century, what would it do? Right?
Yeah.
So but anyways, so to combat this, the German hordes spliced their DNA with bears to combat the wolf DNA sliced super soldiers of Rome, and they've kind of battled and so much survived, and they've developed into their own pockets of shapeshifter communities that, hide from us because the war didn't go well and we don't like talking about them. We don't want, human beings, we don't want to know they exist.
Yeah.
They don't have like mind erasers, but we don't want to know they exist. We erase our own minds. Oh, that didn't happen. They're not like that.
Because I've spoken to another author, Asa Rodriguez, and in his stories, his are based very spiritually in seeing the best in people, and he said when I interviewed him, is that everybody is a god if you are creating. You can be a god because you create. And with his stories, his element is that, again, Earth has been visited by aliens over many years, and it is that technology side. They've come down with all of this technology, so they are aliens, but they appear to be like gods.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like a similar theme with what you've done with yours to a degree. I'm not saying it's a blatant copy. I'm just saying you've got that kind of element of advances in technology popping in and out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I very much do, but they don't have double hearts. They're all single-hearted.
Yeah.
So mine, again, I have a world build which has like God the creator and him overseeing all of this.
Yeah.
Because that's like my take on things. I want to see God honoring science fiction. And that is valuable to me and my spiritual journey. And so that's kind of in what I write. But outside of like a God that cares and is overseeing this kind of thing, I also have human beings that mess up, that have access to. There's this passage that says that whatever we imagine will not be held from us.
Right.
And so I've kind of have this idea that the science fiction of the past is becoming the science fact of today.
Yeah.
So what happens when we do cross those thresholds? What happens when AIs really do rise up? What's going to happen when? I mean, we have Terminator, but I would rather not it have sentient AI beings with time travel capabilities that can like kill off timelines in the past. But hey,
To say, well, what would we do if Siri actually understood what we was asking her?
Yeah, right? I don't know. I don't know if I'd have Siri in my house. Like, would I be one of those people that, put a barbed wire fence around my picket fence and stick the guns out and hope that, people weren't being turned into zombies through computers?
Yeah.
Which is actually the basis for my first book. It's about a computer that utilizes our technology against us to wipe people's minds and turn them into zombies.
Right.
Anyways, not the point. It
sounds really interesting. And the first book is available now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. Sorry. That's not this first book series. That was my first book series that I ever did and published.
Okay.
It's called Bite Me, BYTE.
Right.
Because zombies and computer technology. I thought it was a fun pun, but apparently nobody else recognized it, so I'm totally cool with that. But it exists. I usually don't promote it, but thank you for letting me share about it. Yeah, but it's definitely teetering on. It's definitely YA. It definitely teeters on a dystopian going into world build, but mostly it's just a fun piece of horror level science fiction.
Right.
But anyways, you were talking about how, so for me, it's more like human ambition driving with whatever's on hand. And because I allowed a civilization, like in my mind, it's if the civilization that predated the Romans had running hot and cold water through stone channels, irrigation, and mechanical water pumps, and all of these things that we know to have existed. Rome had automatic opening and closing doors where they would place a fire source on things and it would magically open and close wooden doors.
Right, I didn't know that.
If these civilizations hadn't been destroyed or stopped, what would have developed out of that? How sooner would have we had the kind of technology and science that we have now? And if that existed, to quote Star Wars, in a galaxy far, far away a long, long time ago, what would then develop out of that? What would that culture look like and be like? And how would that bleed into or out of Earth and our own history and stuff?
Yeah.
And so that's really where that thought process and those lines come from, of how the werebear shapeshifter romance comes into play. I promise. If I ever actually write that story down, it will be under a pen name. It will not be under my main series. It will still be in this. It'll still be in this universe, but it will not be under my name.
I'll just explain the werebear shapeshifter, and this is a guy who's really helpful in the self-publishing world called Dale Roberts, and it's a reference to something that he comes up when he wants to explain the obscure, isn't it? He will say, he'll run through all these different channels and methods of writing and genres, and he always seems to pick on the werebear shapeshifter romance. So for those of you that aren't familiar, that's generally what the joke is between us.
Yeah, because he doesn't understand why this exists. I understand. I'm a woman. I understand the nature of romance writing. I don't write it. It is not me. I would rather blow something up. I would rather shoot something up or blow something up or have something explode than to have to go through the trauma of blowing up a relationship in a book for the sake of bringing them back together at the end.
Yeah.
But it is a thing, and people write it. And every once in a while, because I am a woman, I get that urge of, well, it would be really cool to do this urban fantasy build romance. Okay, I could never actually publish that, but what would I do if I did write a werebear shifter romance? And how would that interact with my werebears and my werewolves and their secret communities in the Alpine Mountains in Tennessee and the Georgia mountains?
They sparkle.
Yeah, no. The only reason why my vampires sparkle is if they get their skin cut off and their metal bones show through.
Right. How long have you been writing, Celinda?
Oh, so are we talking professionally, or are we talking like when my teacher got me involved in it in the 3rd grade and I won a prize?
As far back, I mean, for me, being an author from the age of 16, 17, it just took me a very long time to get there. So when did your writing journey begin? I'm guessing 3rd grade in high school then.
Yeah. So when I was in the 3rd grade, I experienced a very traumatic event.
Right.
in which, so I was living in Europe at the time.
Yeah.
And I had family that were living in Russia
All right.
at the time. And so my parents decided to go visit the family in Russia because it's a lot easier to visit Russia from Europe than it is to fly over from the United States. And this, mind you, I am old, so this was just a couple years after the wall fell.
Right.
And things were interesting in Russia and in the parts of Europe that I lived in at the time. But I was young and third grade, so I didn't understand all of those dynamics. And we were traveling back on a train, and we had gotten to Poland from Russia and run out of food and water. And so my parents decided to send my mom off the train with what little money that we had from our travels, left over from our travels, to get some food and water. And we thought that it was a 30-minute train stop. And through broken English and trying to understand their broken Russian, because they were Polish, it was actually only 3 minutes. And so my father got off the train to try to find my mother, and I was left with all of the baggage and all of the passports and all of the identification and all of what was left of our traveling goods from traveling on a train that took off with my parents on the platform.
Right.
And they, luckily, through the grace of God, my mother heard an audible voice in her head that said, "You do not want to be stuck in Poland."
Yeah.
And she turned around and went up. My father grabbed her by the hand, and they ran for a moving train that was moving off the platform. And both of them were able to get on, my father by the last car.
Right.
And as you can imagine, this was a very traumatic event for me. So when I wrote this out as a third grader in my abilities to write at the time, I called it the train trip of terror. Because I always had a way with words and magnifying things. And it won the regional competition. And I was able to go to a writers' conference. And at that writers' conference, they had different writers that came in that were making children's books and making children's fiction, but also like they didn't call it YA back then, but YA fiction for trade publishers. And they talked about what it took to be at that level and what writing meant and how to get it going. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was like, this is a way for me to tell what's in my head, to tell, because I'm an only child.
Right.
And so I live in my head. Books are my escape. I developed allergies when I was in middle school.
Right.
And so the outside is not friendly to me. I get heat stroke really easy, and grass makes me break out in hives. And the one time in Girl Scouts where I slept into a tent, I found out that I was allergic to what they use to make it rainproof, and ended up in the ER not breathing.
Some reaction.
Yeah. So I like to imagine what the world is like by looking out my window. I take what's that? The Lady of Shalott poem very, very seriously. You know, you stare out the window through the mirror, because if you were actually to ever step outside into the world, you'll die. And it's allowed me to have this rampant imagination that builds universes. And characters come to me within those universes, and they want to tell their stories. And I seriously have more outlined than I could probably write in the next 10 years, but I'm trying to get it out.
So focusing on this particular, what is this one called? I don't think I've asked you.
So it's the Imperial War Saga is the series name. And every book starts with Imperial. So it's my first book's Imperial Edge. My second book is Imperial Hilt. And then the third book is, I think, going to be Imperial Assault, or that might be the fourth book. Anyways, one of those is that. I don't have the cover with me right this second. So, but anyways, as you can tell, they all start with Imperial, and then if you can remember my first name, Celinda, I'm very unique. I'm the only Celinda Labrousse out there writing right now, so that I know of.
I will be putting a link in the description for the podcast to your book, so listeners can jump straight to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But yes, I am focusing on finishing up this series. I don't want... These characters are in my heart and in my head, and I really want to finish their journey before I move on to my next project. At the same time, I am writing that Kendall Vea story. And I'm wanting to keep up serially with that. That's a goal. But I really would love some input for that because, like I said, it's a Doctor Who-like world build in which the main character is a American Korean Southern female fashionista who ends up at a German school studying archaeology in Berlin.
Okay. Is this going to be totally separate to the Imperial book series, or is this in the same universe?
So like I said, it's all in the same universe.
Same universe.
But so she's on the planet Earth. She's, American in this new place. And she finds a book that's called the 25%. And when she opens the book up, she's transported to 25% of the time, universe, and everything.
Right.
And so within the 25% are these corridors, and these corridors take her places, and things happen that are supposed to happen. And the first story actually takes place on a imperial colonial planet.
Right.
Well, actually, the second story. The first story on Vela takes place in the future past. It's the past, but it's a futuristic world build on a first generation imperial colonial planet. So it ties into Miranda's world directly, but it's not necessarily Miranda's story. It's very much Anime's story, and what that means and what that looks like. So
okay. Yeah, I haven't got any other questions to ask you. So if you want to just give us your sales pitch. So
okay. I don't know what my sales pitch is. Buy my book. It's available. So I'm currently Amazon exclusive because it's in KDP. I want to try to get as large a readership for my science fiction as possible, and that's what I've been told is good. Eventually, hopefully, I intend to take all my series wide. But for now, they're in KDP and available to those readers, or you can pick it up. My first book is normally $2.99. I do a sale every once in a while for it. You can look out for that, or join my mailing list, and I send out that information on my mailing list. If you do join my mailing list, I have a short called Imperial Fallout, and it is a 10,000K short story about Miranda's time post-basic training in her Ironside training. It's like the equivalent of Marines training, and she has to do a world jump, which is kind of like base jumping out of a plane, except for you're base jumping out of a spaceship landing on a planet.
Okay.
And all the fun that comes along with that. So if you want to pick it up, feel free. It's available just at the back end of my Miranda information. Sign up for my mailing list. You can get that copy free. And yeah, so
Okay. I'll include the link to your mail list in the description as well, so listeners can sign up to your mailing list as well as find your book on Amazon.
Great.
So,
and the rewrite of book 2 should be out hopefully by the end of July, if not middle of August. So.
Okay. So is it on KDP Select? So if they've got the Kindle Unlimited, can they download it for Kindle Unlimited as well?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Not for the short, but for my first books. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks a lot for coming on to the podcast, Celinda. I've enjoyed myself talking to you about your book, and hopefully you've enjoyed yourself talking to me about it as well. And I'll just wrap it up here and just say to anybody listening, then please do check out the links for Celinda's books on Amazon. And if you've got Kindle Unlimited, you can get a free copy. And there's also a freebie if you join her mailing list. So thanks a lot for joining me on Sci-Fi Fans, and come back next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Wayne.
It's been a pleasure.